Calgary University, who is in Beijing, and I'm not sure we've actually made the connection yet with them. But we're ready to, so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Lance and Ian and hopefully Ken.
Hello. Can you all hear me? Ian, give me a sign. Good. My name is Lance Wise, and I'm at the National University of Singapore in the Arts and Creativity Lab of the Interactive and Digital Media Institute. Ian Whaley is in New Zealand at the University of Waikato. I'm going to say that wrong, but and Ken we're still working on, so that's why I'm a little nervous. So what we'll do is launch into our presentation and hope that Ken can join us as we speak and be here for the end part of our conversation. What I have is going to be some aid of some slides. So I'm going to switch off my face, which is probably a blessing for you folks, and go over to some slides. So we're going to be talking about some points and taking a little bit of a different perspective than a lot of what's been going on at the conference so far. Ken Fields, actually, it's too bad that he's not with us right now because he's been instrumental in organizing a lot of the connections between Asian countries, and Ian Whaley in New Zealand has been as well. And these two guys have been kind enough to include us recently, and the Asian and Southeast Asian network are just expanding at a tremendous rate. And what most of us do here, the three of us, is largely electroacoustic music. And so we've been using the networks in a slightly different way than a lot of what we've been hearing about, and we hope to share that with you today. Because, of course, there's lots of overlap in our interests and the techniques and the technologies that make this all possible for all of us. So each one of us, the three of us, or at least the two of us, will give a short discussion about who we are and what we do. And then we're going to talk about some of the content. We're going to split it up this way with me talking about some electroacoustic music and networks, Ian talking about some improvisation practices with an example, and hopefully Ken with Arts Mesh. And then we'll have a little discussion about our future directions and some upcoming concerts that we have planned. So I work at the Communications and New Media Department at the University of Singapore. Strangely enough, I have a technical background. I've been in computers and music since I was a child, or, well, as long as there's been computers and music anyway. And got hired into a Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences where I've been thinking about music in terms of communications, mostly. To let you know where I'm coming from, some of the projects that we've done in my lab include network ensembles, where we look at what happens when instruments themselves are connected through the internet and people can essentially play each other's instruments. I work with psychologists, and we do study listening with EEG experiments, and we try to understand what the brain is doing, and particularly with the notion of surprise. Surprise and violation of expectation, which, as you know, is at the center of a lot of what music is and how it works. We've worked with haptic sensitivity in music and providing a musical experience for deaf kids. We worked with 40 students in Sri Lanka at a school for the deaf, and had tremendous success with sharing music with these kids, and also the chairs being used in a speech learning application as well. And I've done work for sounds in games and electronic sound modeling, algorithmic sound modeling. I wanted to pick up on something that Jeremy Cooperstock said yesterday. He said that latency is the interaction killer. Now, the point is well taken, and we all know what he means by that. But I want to take a closer look at this and question it. So I can think of a couple examples where latency actually is not an interaction killer. We have conversations all the time, and we wait for something on the order of seconds for a response to understand how what we said is being interpreted, or if it was heard, or to get feedback. So in a conversational pattern of communication, latency on the order of what we see in networks of 200 milliseconds, say, is really not a big problem. And conversations are really one of the deepest kinds of interactive activities that we engage in. Similarly, I think in the news these days, it's obvious that the environment, we interact with our environment. And yet the latency can be on the order of many years before we understand the implications of what we do. And that interactivity is nonetheless very deep, and we're very aware of it at all times, and becoming more aware of it all the time. So if music, in fact, exhibits some of the same kinds of communications and environmental situations and constructs that conversations or the environment offer, well then, that kind of music can be very interactive, and latency isn't such a big problem. And this is the kind of music that a lot of us have been making even before we've been communicating over large geographical distances. So even locally, we're making music that's environmental and ambient, conversational patterns, and other sorts of music that's really come about and evolved in the last 100 years or so. Simon Emerson talks about 3 electroacoustic dislocations. This is a picture of Francis Bale at the Acousmonium in Paris. And you can see the composer-performer sitting in front of some 80 speakers. And the dislocations that he's referring to are between the originary musical gesture and the resulting sound. And those dislocations happen in time, because we can make a gesture that creates sound that happens over the course of minutes, days, and years. It's a dislocation in space because the instrumentalist and performer makes a gesture in one place, and the sound may happen in an entirely other place in the room or in the world. And finally, causality, because the sounds we hear, we imagine physical gestures behind them, but it's not the same gesture that the musical performer is making. So there's a dislocation there as well. So these dislocations are not so much caused by technology as I think of them as co-evolving with new kinds of musical composition, production, and performance practices. So what I want to do now is tell you about a couple of technologies that we've developed. And typically this is how we work. We develop a technology, we work with musicians, see how it works, study them, do behavioral studies, psychological studies, and what have you. So I'll tell you about a couple of technologies that really wallow and celebrate this notion of dislocation and perhaps a separation between gesture and sound. So one of those technologies is based on open sound control over IPv6. Open sound control is, you can think of it as the new MIDI. It's the way of generating control signals and having them synthesized on a client or somewhere else. Open sound control has some advantages over MIDI because it's got a higher resolution, it's floating point, and the addressing is rather like URLs. So the addressing can be very rich and complex and flexible. We've got a system that we've recently developed that's based on a server that lets clients from wherever they are in the world join a group. So they send join messages to the server. The server, in turn, communicates to all the clients in the world that you're now a member of a group, and you can start communicating with each other. Once the group is established, the clients communicate in a peer-to-peer fashion directly. So there's no waiting for the, I'm still concerned with latency too, to be honest, of course. And so the peers are connecting directly to each other. And on the client ends, they can be running any kind of application that they want. Processing, max MSP, PD, synthesis algorithms, but also algorithms that allow rich and interesting gestural input. Wind controllers, temperature sensors, it really doesn't matter what the client does. And they can exchange control data. And then at each client location, that's where all the sound is typically synthesized. It doesn't have to be the same sound synthesized at every location. It can be, but the system is completely arbitrary and can be designed in any way that one desires. So we think of sharing data globally and creating sound locally. And again, this supports a kind of music that's different from a traditional instrument where the gesture and the sound are so intimately related, we think of them as almost being one and the same. A second technology that I want to tell you about is what we call an anticipatory improvisation system. What you're looking at here is a shared collaborative workspace that musicians located in different areas would all see on their, typically what would be a multi-touch tablet screen display. On the right, you see a private interface, instrumental interface. Again, this is representational. You could actually have a physical interface to this too, it doesn't matter. But the idea is that they're working on a shared space, and that this is private, and that the control signals are being sent around to the other clients. Then on the left, we see what is a scrolling score. The score scrolls right to left like a piano roll. And the performers can work in an improvisation setting, not just in the eternal now, which is where improvisers typically work, listening, sharing eye contact, making gestures, mostly in the now, but it's very little that they can tell about the future plans of their colleagues. But with this system, you're essentially improvising in the future as well, as these gestures and icons that represent different kinds of musical activity can be planted into the future on the order of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 seconds or so that musicians can indicate their plans or suggest behaviors to their co-performers, or even generate control signals that can automatically synthesize sound when they reach the now. And so this is an idea that gets away from the composer being the only one that can generate scores. So it's a collective democratic notion of scoring, and it also is the idea of spreading the awareness of time out from this one point, the now, over a window of time that goes a little bit into the future and a little bit into the past. So obviously, it's a different kind of music that comes about, a different way of thinking, a different way of listening, and a different way of performing. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ian.
Okay, so you can hear me all right? My voice is coming through clearly? Yes. So I'm just following up from what Lance will control my slides here. For the first 3 slides, we planned with 3 different people, so I was going to do the talking head in the middle for a lot of this, and Ken was to come at the end, but I'm not sure whether Ken will join us. We'll see how we go. So for the first three or four slides, just by way of brief introduction, I'm Associate Professor and Studio Director here at the Conservatorium of Music at the University of Waikato in New Zealand, and my current research focuses on generative systems in music, music over high-speed internet. We've been working on this as a performance and composition medium for 3 years or so, and intelligent agent applications in nonlinear music. So I'm basically a composer. I focus on live performance and machine interactive outcomes. So on the next slide, Lance, if you want to change over, my recent research work has included things like software agent development. I published these things as Cambridge University Press. Some recent examples of work here, which I'll refer to in a minute or so, includes Mitsuno Yugo, which was done for the Music Acoustica Festival in Beijing last year. Some of the work in generative systems I've mentioned here, and also a couple of other large works that are internet-based. One of the most recent things I have done with Ken is to put together an issue of Organised Sound, which is Cambridge University Press, on electroacoustic music and Internet 2, which will come out next March. I think it will be a very good overview of how this medium interfaces with some of the cutting-edge work that's going on in composition and performance particularly. So as I said, the work will be out next March. A little bit about our current studio setup we have here. We are multi-directional. over 48K over a number of lines. Lance, if you could just shift the slide forward one thing. So we can run 64 channels, stereo, multi-directional with our partners. We are IPv4 and IPv6 capable over the audio lines, and we can run multiple channels at the same time through OSC data. So we can have up to, I've had up to 50 channels, for example, running stereo with 30 odd channels running OSC at the same time, and we can run all our data channels, video data channels that you're seeing on the screen at the same time for performance. We can run the graphics layers in over the top of that with DV or digital video. We have a direct link also to the high performance computing cluster here on campus. So we have a grid-based computing system that we've got plugged in to a high-speed link. And we can also send and receive in surround sounds, multiple surround sound to stations around the world. And of course, we can stream the video collection out in real time. So we're very well wired together and have experimented with quite a number of technologies over quite a period of time. Just on the next slide here, Lance, if you want to just turn that on, there's a picture recently. We were playing in our lab here on one side of the world with people in Beijing, with a lead player playing a shakuhachi player, with some drummer, buffalo drum parts playing in this minutes in mono from thinking in like sounds that we get. You want to just let that run a minute, Lance, and then I'll talk from there.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like you can talk over it though. The music and you are sort of alternating, so it has to be one or the other.
Okay, so sorry about that. Okay,
Shall I go ahead and play it now?
You want to go back to my talking head? I'll just read through this. I'll just read through my slides then from the. If you want to go back to my, presentation rather than the slide, I can talk from there. Yes. So if you want to switch to my face rather than it'll come back in a minute.
Your face is on. We see your face.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so that work I just mentioned here, it included input from 3 different countries over the IPv6, using the IPv6 format, Internet 2, multiple visual video connections. We went through different countries that I managed to put together traditional instruments together with electroacoustic instruments, together with an intelligent agent system that would run at the same time. So try to combine traditional music players with electroacoustic music processing of parts and also with machine intelligence at the same time. So what I thought I would do is just talk about, from just a pragmatic point of view of having had to do this from a performer and compositional point of view, what were some of the most useful things that I've picked up from this that other people might find useful, or ways to think about this. And I thought, if I just mentioned, say, 5 things about production and 5 things about relationship, I think that would be probably the most useful thing to look at. So in terms of production, I think you have to start from 2 choices, or the creative goals that you're going to use if you're going to be an improviser. One is a structured-centered approach, which allows participants, whether they're humans or machines, to fill prescribed musical or performance outcomes that are directed. So you set the structure and let people fill it in. Or you can take a process-centered approach that concentrates on exploring possibilities or fulfilling goals through collaboration or competition. And that experience will differ each time that you play it. So it's like 2 parts of a continuum. In electroacoustic music, we call this continuum the difference between a linear and a non-linear approach, although it could be applied to both form and content. If you are going to hitch together any sort of machines, the 2 most useful approaches that I found, of course you can use just a straight peer-to-peer approach. You have one computer on one side of the network or something at another and just use a bridge and play backwards and forwards. But probably a more useful approach is to go to a central server or even an audio mixing outfit, so everything is sent to one central system. Then this one central system will pipe out many streams to all the participants who can modify and change the streams as they stream back to them. So you end up with this multi-directional capability where people can put things back and forwards and add things in to flexible system. In terms of production again, the latency, yes, you have to come to terms with it. There was a theorist called Rebelo who put forward a number of different approaches to cope with this. What most people use in traditional music is called a realistic jam approach, where you try and make the network as close as possible that you can to just being with people in the same room at the same time. But I think a more useful approach is called the latency accepting approach, and this is where electroacoustic music fits very well. So instead of trying to see latency as a problem, you just learn to compose in ways that accept the latency, and you learn to make pieces where the timing is not critical. Although timing is very fast, from New Zealand to Calgary, for example, is 167 milliseconds. To Australia, of course, much lower. To Beijing, the longest we've had is around 340 odd milliseconds. So it does count the further that you get away, but you find ways to compensate. The latency can also be a creative opportunity. So you use the latency as a network of delays, or you take the delay from one part, you add it to the delay of another part, and you create a piece around the delay that also exists. Rather than seeing a problem, I think it's a creative opportunity. In terms of the ways to think about new possibilities within this medium, the theorist called Vollmer put forward a number of tests to say, what does this new medium bring that other things don't? And he put forward interplay with network characteristics, or how the structural characteristics of the network will actually shape the work that you're working on. Interactivity and openness, or the extent to which audiences can join in and manipulate pieces as well. And complexity and flexibility, or how musically and sonically flexible can the outcome be from one performance to another. And based on this analysis, he was saying that the mediums that are best suited to this idea are hybrid music, hybrid instruments, real and virtual sound installations, and algorithmic and generative music. So this new network space is very suited to some of these emerging art forms, as well as putting these emerging art forms, I think, together with more traditional music. One of the things that I found really interesting, coming from a strict compositional background that is very command and control based, was this linear and edit-based approach that you would normally take with composition, where you have maximum control over all of the parameters that you can have. Innovation and reflection then become part of the system towards perfection. But you have to leave a lot of these things behind in interactive and generative systems, and in their place you put together spontaneity and multiple and varied outcomes. It's almost like you take performance value back into network systems that is lost in edit-based systems where you just sit in front of the computer, or you sit in front of a score and compose. So those are the technical things. In terms of the relationships things, probably the 4 or 5 things that I've learned that are the most useful. The number one thing is what motivates people to invest or do in any of this in the first place. It's very time consuming, and it's very complicated, and it's expensive, and often it's cheaper just to fly people from around the world to get them in one place and do it anyway. So the question is always asking, why do you want to do this over networks? Why couldn't you just do this to get people together anyway? People like to talk and drink and do other things, and they make music in other ways. And also, the dynamics of these things are not symmetrical. Not everyone in the world has equal access to all of these tools, of course. So you have to ask, well, what is the benefits? Well, my only experience is that it's not just rewarding beyond what you can do with people in the same room. It's a pleasure from a musical point of view. Have to play with people in 4 countries at once, coordinate with people in the same room, play to an audience at the same time, and interact with all the machinery at once. There is a intrinsic value in doing this thing, I think, above and beyond just dealing with the medium interaction. So it's the idea, I think the reward is that it's the idea of interacting with both real and virtual environments and the machinery at the same time. That's what reward it brings. But I think in order to keep people on board, you have to develop relationships over a long time, good relationships through the process of rehearsal, and the more that people can identify their contribution in the process towards making a work and keep their contribution recognizable, the more satisfaction they get out of it. So you have to build good relationships, give people a place where they recognize the value of what they're more or less doing. So next thing is, what is the way of managing those relationships towards getting things done? Rebelo in 2009 put forward 3 models, what he called dramaturgy models of getting things done. His idea was that you could use a projected dramaturgy approach. It's more or less like having a conductor in an orchestra where one person controls everything and just tells everyone to come in, and that's the way it works. A second approach would be directed dramaturgy, where a person sketches out a number of themes but becomes more like a film director where a number of people will join in and take part, and it becomes a collective whole, which a lot of people have made. And thirdly, you can be very democratic and you would say, well, no one will take the lead, everyone can do what they like, so the form and structure evolve. And having tried all of those sorts of things, probably the most artistically satisfying one is somewhere between those two extremes. You have to have some democratic participation, but also you have to have some sort of structure to make it work. Latency mentioned the whole idea of including OSC messages. So we can include OSC messages. We can also include intelligent machines. I've written a number of things on multi-agent technology and machine intelligence in music, and I think this really leaves people with 2 possibilities. You can select a multi-agent system that is self-contained, that just generates things to which you just join in, but it doesn't really do anything, only generate things but not talk. Or you can take this idea of an intelligent machine system that will adapt to input, it will talk backwards and forwards. And this allows the possibility with OSC of including intelligent machines in the improvisational dialogue. So it allows people to have relationships with machines as part of the network process. A few other final things. The first one is, in order to perform, of course, we need some sort of instruments. We could take straight acoustic instruments and write scores, or we could include traditional instruments as well. I've done a number of things with traditional Maori instruments from New Zealand, for example, that are not score or notation based. To this, we can add electroacoustic processing by simply adding effects, these sorts of things. But of course, there are lots of new instruments that we can invent that belong to the telemusic space. And I think most instruments evolve in a particular acoustic and a particular set of social practices. So we haven't really yet found what are the instruments that fit telemusic. What are the aesthetics of this network? How do we draw on instrument building traditions that have grown over a long period of time and optimize instruments for this new space? And I think there are new instruments that start to being developed that are hybrid between different kinds of controllers that people become tactilely very used to, Xbox machines, iPad controllers, so that these sorts of things become the interfaces for new instruments into this new space. I think the intermediary space of this is the laptop orchestra that is fairly ubiquitous, which is finding its way into this space. So in conclusion, what do I think is the most significant thing is, probably the thing that I found about Internet 2 is really then it anticipates in this new decision space the extent to which interactive music paradigms are likely to be extended. But what fundamentally it does is it anticipates the changing of the roles between the composer and the musician and the producer. But what it also does is that it anticipates the creative role that programmers are likely to play in Internet 2-based works, but also anticipates the role of new instrument builders. So I think this idea of these divisions that was historically set apart will certainly become much more put together, in the sense that I certainly find myself being partly an instrument builder now, much more a programmer, certainly partly a composer, but more a director than I would be in traditional music, and a performer and an improviser. So your role changes quite significantly. And I think we also have to look forward to more participatory roles for audiences who will want to join in to these events rather than being passive recipients. And we will also look to what sort of uses people will want to make of the product that we are putting out, and they may use the product in unintended ways. So we can look forward to a more participatory roles and breaking that division between the producers, I think, and the audience. certainly that's happening where people want to join into events that are internet streamed and not necessarily always be passive on the other side of things. So those roles, I think, are changing. The bits and pieces that I've put forward here are all summarized in the paper that will come out in the OS Journal, Organized Sound Journal, early next year, which is much broader than that. But really what I tried to do was to summarize the decision space for me that had changed quite significantly as a practitioner, and the new decisions that have to be made from a creative perspective across this field that I simply hadn't struck before. And what sort of aesthetic line does one take through this? So although the decision space expands considerably, every composer, I think, will then have to take a line through what is important to them in order to get whatever their product is out the end of it. So, as Lon said, I don't know if Ken has joined us yet, but we've put together quite a number of partners now around the Asia-Pacific region on our Asia Web idea. So we have partners around the Asia-Pacific Rim. Our next big event is Music Acoustica 2011, which is a 6-day event in Beijing that's held at the end of October, which we have a number of high-speed internet works being played. These combine a number of countries at once. The work I'm doing, for example, combines Beijing and Singapore National University and New Zealand at the same time, where we put players together in a number of countries. And we will combine high-speed audio together with OSC data control as well at the same time. So I was up there. Is Ken able to join us, or we still lost him, or?
No, Ken isn't with us, but I suggest that we just play 30 seconds of your piece of music and then go to questions.
It's in mono. If you're playing, it is in mono, is it, from your side?
Well, it'll be in mono, yeah.
Yes, but you'll have should I? Then, yes, that's fine.
All right.
It's very different hearing it on mono than multiple track stereo at 48K. So
I think we have introduced some concepts and topics that are a little different than have been presented so far at this conference. Luckily, we're on video conferencing, so nobody can lob tomatoes or anything, but you can lob some questions. I know it takes a minute to shift over to questions here, and people can use Chatzy or we're all ears too. So.
Okay, Christiane Orto had a question for you, so we'll ask her to go ahead and ask that.
Yes, certainly. Do you see these electroacoustic performances happening in traditional concert venues or in new performance venues? What we see here described is very much in a laboratory environment, and I'm wondering how this then translates into a performance setting.
So I'm happy to answer that. The Beijing Acoustica Festival is not, although I played in our current environment, I'm sitting in a lab. The Beijing Festival is wired into a concert hall, and so that at any one of the nodes that are wired into the concert hall, their concert halls, you have big audiences at the stations that you play at, as well as the internet audience, as well as the audience at each station. So, for example, I'm sitting in my lab here at the moment. I don't have to play from this lab. I can take my equipment to our concert hall and play to our audience at the same time as pitch it into the Beijing audience and play live. Because personally I try to include acoustic instruments with electroacoustic transformation, I do this purposely to bridge between broader audiences and the electroacoustic audience at the same time. So it's something that I've worked very hard on, is not demarcating those things, but trying to make sure that it has a broader uptake.
A lot of this music did originate in labs, and 15 years ago, a lot of it happened in labs, but there's just been a proliferation, and there's some excellent conferences that have been facilitating the development of technology and musical practices and instrument design. For example, the conference called New Interfaces for Musical Expression, which you may be aware of, NIME, has been, well, instrumental, so to speak, in bringing inventions and inventive ways of people engaging with their bodies and with other kinds of data to interact with music. And of course, the miniaturization and the proliferation of inexpensive equipment has also allowed this kind of music to go out of the labs on tablets and mobile phones and into kids' bedrooms now too. So.
And then how do you maintain production values? I mean, because there's so much effort put in all of this, extreme effort. And I'm just curious, as you say, everything is now decentralized and breaking down barriers is fantastic. But then how do you handle the fact that you have a mix of different qualities of technology and venues and expertise in a distributed environment like you have? Or is that not the point?
No,
well,
no, personally it's not. Personally it's not, because of all the works that I've done, I control the audio quality as it comes through in real time, so that everything I have done in this medium, I'm very happy to be broadcast on radio. That work that I played you is straight off the performance of Beijing. I hardly touched it at all. I put some basic compression on for radio play, but it's straight out to Radio New Zealand, exactly as it stands to broadcast quality. So, but our lines in that here are, we ran all that system 48K through everything that was better than stereo, the CD quality, of course. And because we have such good equipment, and in that particular work I played with such good musicians, the quality is the last thing to worry about. I think it gets more difficult when you include more and more amateur people who want to join in. But I think that's one of the things that needs to be explored. And one of the big aesthetics that is coming out at the moment, or the question is that why do people have to use the interface that you provide in the way that you intend it to be used? Why can't people subvert whatever interface you use? And the history of music of technology is full of people who made this leap. Jimi Hendrix with distorted guitar, for example, who then said, this is not what you're supposed to do with this, but this is what I will do with it. So subverting interfaces is a normal part of doing this throughout musical history. So we can't really, I don't think it's a matter of imposing aesthetic. Some of these things just happen in unexpected ways that you tend to run on as well. So there's two answers, really.
Thank you very much.
I had a question also. Lance, in a previous event, we were using Jack Trip, and then we used audio or video conferencing kind of just as a sideline, but it was completely out of sync. So now, are you using OSC to handle both the video and the audio, and is it in sync? And what about and how's the latency on that system compared to like Jack Trip?
We run them on different channels, and Ian can answer this probably better than I can, because he's been using the OSC groups for a long time, but it's all run on separate channels, the video, the audio, and the data right now. There has been some discussions about embedding data in video, but video is the slowpoke in the equation because of the coding and decoding that has to go on both sides. So just like we want to do with audio, is just get it there as quickly as possible. The same is true of the data.
Okay. So,
The
so it's
audio
still not
is
quite
gonna-
synced up.
No.
That's right.
But
The audio
the-
and
Mm.
if
The
that is if
audio
you're
is-
running audio at the same time. So a lot of what I was talking about was sending only data and synthesizing audio on the client side. And the interesting thing about that is, if you think about it, is say we were both controlling a rhythm. You were controlling a snare drum and I'm controlling a bass drum. But they're both being synthesized at the client side, right? And those things can be exactly in sync, to whatever degree you would like them to be, just because you're hearing it at a different time than I am. Nonetheless, what you're controlling and what I'm controlling are in fact in sync to both our ears on both our clients. So there's some interesting scenarios that can be set up with synchronization that way.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'd like to thank you both for your presentation. I'm sorry that we couldn't get Ken connected with you, but some very, very interesting information, and we appreciate it. We're going to have to move on to our next presentation, and we're collaborative creations across continents, and the presenters are Kirsty Guster at Australian National University and Christian Orto at